In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Ange Davis. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello friends, welcome to the show. Today's guest is Jay Abbasi, a global keynote speaker, TEDx speaker, coach, and former Tesla leader who helps professionals thrive under pressure without burning out. At Tesla, he led national training programs for over 1,000 employees and has since coached leaders at Google, Amazon, TikTok, Wells Fargo, and many more. That's quite the CV. He's been featured in Forbes Founder, Authority Magazine, and Medium, and he's the host of the top-rated podcast, Unstuck with Jay Abbasi. Blending corporate experience with deep expertise in mindfulness, resilience, and well-being, Jay offers a powerful message that success isn't about avoiding challenges, but mastering them with clarity, energy, and purpose. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you so much, Ange, for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to our chat because I feel like so much of what you do and what you believe in is in line with my thoughts and beliefs, but also what we talk about here on the Work and Wellness Podcast. And I want to start a little bit with the word pressure, and a lot of your body of work is about helping people thrive under pressure without burning out. But do you think that pressure is actually the problem, or have we simply just not been given the tools to handle pressure and respond to it well?
That's such a good question because I do think the problem is more on the perception of pressure and our response to it, the story we tell ourselves about it, not so much the pressure itself. So I use this analogy a lot, and it's like you go to the gym and let's say you are lifting some weight. I'll use the example of the bench press. You're lying on the bench, you have that bell above you, and you put some weight on it. Well, when you're going to work out, you look at that weight and you think, this is going to help me to be stronger. And you kind of look forward to it. It's something that you do because you know it's going to help you to grow. And so you don't look at that demand or that pressure in such a negative light. And I feel like, for me, I was never given that teaching. I was always told pressure is something that is negative. You want to avoid it. You want to remove it. And really, pressure is where you grow. That's the good stuff. That's what helps to build you into the person that you are becoming. And so I think the biggest shift that I've had to learn in my own personal experience, working under crazy amounts of pressure, and then working with leaders who are dealing with a ton of pressure, is it's not so much of trying to remove the weight from the barbell as much as having a different interpretation of what that pressure actually means and how it can actually be serving you.
It's so true. I really do think it is a mindset thing. My husband and I do one big hard thing every year. We ran an ultra marathon last year together, and we do that because it almost primes us to deal with pressure and hard things. You know, you choose the pressure in other scenarios and it tells you that you can handle pressure in the unchosen scenarios. But how do you help people shift their mindset and then prepare for that pressure? You know, in the same way you were saying about the gym, you know, you can go to the gym and bench press and that helps you build your strength in that area. What are some of the ways that you help leaders build their strength to handle pressure?
Yeah, I think it always starts, Ange, with acknowledging whatever you're experiencing in the moment. So, for example, if you are dealing with a ton of pressure at work and it is stressful and you're anxious about it, I would not encourage someone to say, well, just ignore that and see it
Yeah.
as a positive, right? That doesn't help. I've been in many leadership roles, and a story I just thought of, and why I'm laughing is because there's a feedback I once received that really completely shifted how I think about all of this. So I was working for a company named Solar City. I was a manager, a new manager, pretty new manager, about a month, 2 months in. And I was learning all about leadership development edge. And they were saying the best thing you could do is get feedback from your team. And so I start calling up every one of my reps one day. And everyone's saying, Jay, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing awesome. And then I got to George. And George was my top performer and very honest. He was very blunt. And so I asked George, I said, how can I be better for you, George? I want to be a better leader. And George goes, well, Jay, you're doing a great job. That hesitation, right? And I heard that hesitation in his voice. And I said, George, come on, there's something there. Please help me. I want to be better for you. And George said something I'll never forget. He said, Jay, at times we're going through a lot of difficulty, a lot of pressure. And while I love that you're so positive, sometimes it feels like you don't understand what we're going through. And that stung, Ange. That really stung. And I felt that I was a leader that wasn't acknowledging his pressure and his challenge. And it also made me realize at times I'm not acknowledging that within myself, that I'm just pushing it aside. And so ever since then, I've really made it an intention, whether I'm coaching someone else or even just working through my own stuff, to acknowledge whatever I'm feeling. I have to start there. That's the beginning. And then the next step is, what are some other ways of looking at this? And I start to ask questions, whether it's to myself or if I'm coaching someone who's dealing with a lot of pressure. And through the questions we ask, we can then start to look at it from different angles and consider how this pressure may actually be something that could either be serving you or it's a signal to take a different action.
Yeah, we love people like George, right? People who will actually take a moment to give you the feedback. But I think he really nailed something. And sometimes we can feel like, okay, we're trying to help people through and be positive, but it ultimately leads to someone feeling unseen or misunderstood. And I think that can be a real balance when you're leading a team. You know, you don't want to get down into the, I know it's really bad and really hard, but you need to acknowledge it. Otherwise, people just feel misunderstood.
You're absolutely right. And it's a both and kind of thing. It's not a this or that. You can meet somebody where they are and acknowledge their difficulty and help them to get out of the rut. Help them to, I use this analogy sometimes. It's like, imagine there's a person in a hole in the ground. You don't just go look over the hole and say, oh, that stinks for you. Sorry, you're down there. Goodbye, and walk away. You don't do that. Right. See ya. Hopefully you get out of this, right? You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You also, as you said, though, Angie, you don't want to climb into the hole and be down there and then say, oh, this is really hard. It stinks to be down here. And then guess what? We're both in this hole now.
Stuck. Yeah.
And we're both stuck down here, and we're going to just have to deal with these feelings and not actually work to improve it. We don't want to do that. So the approach we want to take, and I mean this in two ways, for ourselves as well as how we lead others, is take a rope, tie it around a stump in a tree, take that rope, tie it around your waist, climb down the hole and say, hey, I get it. You're down here and it's hard. And I feel you. I understand. And if you take my hand together, let's get out of this hole. Let's figure out a solution. When you lead yourself or others in that way, then you have the both and, the human side of things as well as the performance side of things. And I know, Ange, from what I learned about you and your podcast, people listening care about doing great work. They care about high performance. And I guess my message to everyone is it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be I only think about my feelings and my performance suffers, or I only perform and I suppress all of my feelings. There's a both and here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think for so long, it felt like it's been binary and there isn't that ability to have paradox where both can be true, both can exist at the same time, and you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And I'm really thankful for people like you doing the work. This is why I do the work I do, to show people that it's an and, not an or. And, you can be very successful and be really well at the same time. And I think that's really important. You spent years at Tesla, arguably one of the highest performance companies in the world. It's obviously extremely well known. What did working in that environment teach you about the difference between high performance and unsustainable high performance?
Yeah, I think what it taught me was learning how to, I guess, a formula to perform at a high level where you don't bring it home with you,
Mm,
which you can, I think it's really hard to learn that without experience. I think experience taught me that. It wasn't like they sat me down in the classroom and said, okay, here's how you do it at Tesla and be a top
yeah.
performer. No one did that. It was just having to figure it out. And here's the thing, and I think that I went through that experience having already gone through a lot personally, having already worked through some loss and some challenges and some
Mm,
difficulty. And because of that, I had that muscle built up in me a little, while others I saw that I worked with didn't. And I think the thing I learned was uh, really caring for my energy mattered, like
mm,
really ensuring I protected my energy day in and day out. And when I say take care of your energy, I'm saying the physical side of things, right? Making sure that you are doing what you need to do, some physical movement to really build up and cultivate that energy within
mm.
yourself, and as well as being able to have that time to appreciate moments with family, appreciate moments away from work. Look, I sometimes I did work late nights, Ange. Sometimes I would
Yeah.
be at the office there till 11:30. What I realized though was I made that choice and I was okay with that choice. It wasn't a choice I made with resistance. And I also made other choices to be able to stop working
Mm.
and enjoy time outside of work. And I think that learning that is what allowed me to be a high performer rather than I'm going and going and going in a way that's not sustainable till where I burn out and I have to take FMLA or take a vacation just to regain my sanity.
I think it's so true because this is what I say a lot. You know, looking after yourself is not about not working hard. Like, it's okay to work hard and want to perform really well. And there will be ebbs and flows where you work long hours, but it's about how you recognize that and then take the recovery. So I always say, like, take the ebbs and flows. If you've got a period of busyness, then don't guilt yourself into leaving at 3 o'clock if you need to leave at 3 when the workload is a little lighter on, or being like, you know what, I've had a really big week. I'm going to start at 9 each day this week instead of 7:30 or 8, and accepting that rather than just working at this high level all the time.
You use the word there, Angela, I think was so important, which is accepting that. I
Mm,
think that we are struggling when we are in states of resistance.
mm,
So if I'm resisting the hours that I'm working, or if I'm trying to spend time with family and I'm resisting that because I'm being pulled back into work, that's where it becomes problematic. So
mm.
just like we were saying before with the amount of weight you put on the barbell, like I didn't mind the demand that increased when it did. I didn't mind it because I looked at it. I made the choice to lift up that weight, take
Yeah.
that demand. And as you just said, when I needed to rest, just like when exercising, when you need to rest,
Mm,
you rest. There's nothing in nature, by the way, Ange, if you just look at nature, nothing in nature goes and goes and goes and goes and goes until it depletes. How
yeah.
nature works is that it has this time of growth, and then it has a time of rest, then it has a time of growth again, then it has a time of rest. That is the natural cycle. I feel like human beings, unfortunately, we broken that cycle
Yeah.
often and we
Yeah.
just work ourselves to the bone because society tells us we're supposed to, because we think that's how we get ahead, or we're saying, I'm sacrificing the now for something I'm going to get in the future. And it's all backwards because in the end, how life is really enjoyed and the kind of fulfillment you get is when you have joy throughout the journey, not as the reward for all the hard work you do.
It's so true. You said a couple of things there. I think, where you said acceptance. I mean, that's ultimately, if you think even about psychology, that's always the goal of therapy, right? Is acceptance. You can not often change the outcomes of things, but acceptance is the goal. And I think we can learn a lot from that. I also think we can learn a lot from nature, by the way. It's been doing it for ever. So I think we can, like, we can take a little lesson from that. And I think we should do that more as humans. It's so important to us and our well-being. And, last year my dad died suddenly 3 months after he retired. And it's exactly that, right? He waited until he retired to want to do everything. And we're not promised it. So allowing ourselves that joy and enjoyment throughout the journey rather than this societal pressure of working until the very end and then you get to enjoy it. And I agree with you. I just think we've got that so wrong. How do you encourage people, though, to think differently with so much pressure that's built in? I think it's built into our systems, in the way we work, in our workplaces, in everything that we learn is sort of that, you've got to work hard, work till the end, and then you get the freedom. How do you encourage people to think about for them what a really rich life is so that they're not taking that focus or they're not letting society or the workplace influence the way that they work and they live?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, Ange, by the way. That's always a hard thing to lose. I lost my father a little over 12 years ago, and definitely makes you think about life differently when you lose a
Sure
parent.
does.
And so I think the way I approach it for someone to at least get them to open up to this idea is to ask them to zoom out and look at their life as a whole. Maybe go to the end. Imagine you're at the end and you're looking back and you're thinking about the impact that you left. Well, what is that impact? What is the legacy? What are the things that you don't want to regret? And if you can do it from that perspective, it opens you up to this idea of, well, I don't want to wait till I get to the end and then regret that I didn't live the life I always wanted. I don't want to wait till I get to the end and no one gets to the end of their life and says, I wish I worked more.
Yeah.
No one
true.
says that. What they say, and there's a famous book on this, The 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie
Yes.
Ware.
She's Australian. She's an Australian care nurse. Yeah.
Yes, and she's fantastic, and that book is amazing. And the regrets are more along the lines of I didn't allow myself to be happy. I didn't allow myself to stay in touch with people that I really wanted to. I was living a life that other people wanted me to live. Those were the things that people say. And so I hope that would be the motivation for people to start to think differently. And how I approach it is I ask someone individually, uniquely, and that way it's something that's truly meaningful to them. And from there, I guess it really opens our eyes. And then I also encourage people to stop thinking about their goals in regards to or using specific outcomes for their goals and thinking about those outcomes. So for example, if you say your goal is to be promoted or your goal is to earn a certain amount of money, well, you don't experience the amount of money in the bank account. You don't experience the promotion. What you experience is what it would give you, right?
Yeah.
So I invite people to think about, well, what do you want to experience? That's one of my favorite questions. What do you want to experience? And when you think about experientially, it starts to shift someone's mind away from status and titles and, climbing the corporate ladder and all that stuff into what do I really want my life experience to be?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so important because we can get so caught up in the physical world of the physical things we want rather than the experiences that we want to have. And that's why I talk a lot about defining your rich life, not necessarily financially rich, but experientially. What is a rich life to you and how do you make sure you're continuing to live towards that rich life for you, which is different to me, which is different to someone else, right? Some people might value travel. Some people might value, a wonderful home. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's about sitting with what that is for each individual person, not what Instagram or society says you need or you should have,
It's so true. And there's a really comprehensive study that really hits home on the importance of not living life with an attachment to an outcome. It's considered one of the most comprehensive. It had over 12,000 people in the study. It was over 20 years, and it was called Zeroing In on the Dark Side of the American Dream. So it was done in the United States. And what they found was that people who believed that happiness, that success comes from money, status, living what is the perceived American dream, those people showed the lowest life satisfaction scores of anyone in the study. Those people also had the most mental health struggles of anyone in the study.
Wow.
Now, what the study suggests is not that it's a problem to have goals. I have many goals, and Ange, I'm sure you do too. We have goals. It's to say, the problem is to say, I'll be happy when I achieve that. That's when I'm going to experience joy. I'm going to work so hard and put so much effort in, sacrifice my own happiness now for a perceived happiness in the future. That's a problem. And it breaks my heart that so many people are living this way. And it's why it's my mission, I feel, to really break that cycle for people.
Yeah, and help people find a level of happiness and joy in every day, you know, in finding it in the small moments, in whatever that is for people. And I think that's really a big part of being present as well. I think a lot of us move through our lives with a real lack of presence. We're thinking about what we've got to do tomorrow, where we've got to go, and all of this stuff in the future rather than sort of being present now. What are your thoughts on presence, and how do you encourage people to sort of bring presence into their everyday life?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot, especially because I'm doing some alterations to a keynote that I'm giving, and the Viktor Frankl quote always hits home for me. From author of Man's Search for Meaning, the quote is, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." I feel like that quote really teaches so much about how to live a good life. And in it, he refers to the space. And I think of the space as being present, as in I am observing what's happening in the present moment with intention and without judgment. So that's a form of a definition one could use for mindfulness. And I feel like mindfulness has gotten a bit of a bad play because it's in pop culture everywhere. And it's, the person who's sitting cross-legged and floating in a cloud or something. And I don't see it that way. It's upsetting to me because I feel like mindfulness changed my life for the better. And I feel that it's helped me to have that space between stimulus and response. Something happens, something difficult. I learn how to be here now, present in this moment, and observe it without judgment. Okay, that's power, as he says in that quote. That's power because now I can choose a response. And I feel like you can't do that if you're not present. You can't do that if you're caught in your story. You can't do that if you're brooding about the past or you're ruminating about the future. You can't in this moment make great decisions. And if all of us, our experience is the decisions we make, the choices we make in the present, because that's all we really have, right?
Yeah.
We can't change the past and we can't change the future. We just have the present moment. Then what is a more valuable skill than being present? How can there be anything that's more important than being present? Because in being present, you have clarity, you can respond, you can make better choices. Sure, it helps to relieve stress and all of that too, but to me, that's not even as important as being able to have all of my faculties in this moment and be able to make the best choices without being pulled so much by whatever the initial emotional reaction was.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's being able to respond in a way that we want to rather than react in that autopilot way, which I think happens a lot for people. And then you end up having to do repair or try and go back and fix your reaction, And so I think that presence also requires quite a lot of self-awareness. And I wonder your thoughts on how important self-awareness is for leadership. I think it's a really core part of leadership, but what's your take on self-awareness? And do you think it's the most important foundation of leadership, or do you think there's another foundation that's more important?
I think it's the foundation. I think it's the foundation, Ange. I think that no leader can effectively lead with service in mind, with wanting to focus on the best result for others without self-awareness, because the natural tendency of all of us, this is me included, our natural tendency is to protect ourselves and to be in a mindset of self-referential thinking, protecting me, getting what I want. And that's human. That's not like this negative thing. It's wired into us in order to survive. And it's served us in many ways and still serves everyone in how they live their lives. In a position of leadership, however, you need to have to drop that ego.
Yeah.
If you truly want to serve and you want people who are following because they truly believe in you and they will go above and beyond to serve the mission of whatever it is the work you're doing, well, that leader needs to be able to not make it about them. And that requires a great deal of self-awareness. And so I really don't think there's anything more important for a leader to cultivate than self-awareness.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think there are a lot of senior leaders in very big organizations who don't have necessarily a great level of self-awareness. How do you encourage leaders to cultivate self-awareness, first of all? And second of all, how do you convince them that it's important if they're high on ego?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll start with the second question. The best thing you could gather is feedback that is honest, that they have to really take in. If they get that feedback from their direct reports or partners or whomever, that they are acting in ways that are harmful and there's actual evidence to it, I think that oftentimes will open someone up. I also think if you understand the person's goals and they genuinely want to achieve those, and you explain it well enough that you can very easily connect the dots between, well, your goal is this. By being a more self-aware leader, you will get there faster. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I really do believe that. So how does one cultivate it? Well, I do encourage leaders to take up a practice of mental stillness. And I'm careful with that language because some people hear a word like meditation and they go, "Oh, that's not for me." And that's okay. That's fine. A practice of mental stillness means that you are intentionally paying attention to the present moment and you're doing so without judgment. So that could be in the form of a meditation. It could be in the form of a prayer. It could be in the form of journaling. It could be in the form of going out for a walk without headphones. I told you I was doing that actually earlier today. To me, the vehicle through which you do it is less important than committing to the activity that requires you to be aware and observant of what's happening here and now and not adding layers of story to it. So I encourage leaders to cultivate that through a practice that they commit to regularly, just like they would commit to a fitness routine. This is their mental fitness routine. And then the other thing I encourage leaders to do is throughout the day to have moments of pause and take inventory. Consider, what are you feeling in the moment? Take a break for 2 minutes and write out, what are you thinking about? What is your priority at that moment? What's the thought train sounding like, right? Or where are you spiraling, or what are the emotions that you're feeling in your body? And just having people do this regularly and check in with themselves builds up the muscle. And you could do that through simple things like setting up alerts on your phone or having some visual reminder to be checking regularly in with yourself. And the good news about all this, Ange, is for the busy leader who says, I don't have a lot of time, this doesn't take a lot of time. This could be 5 to 10 minutes of practice in the morning, and throughout the day, just quick check-ins with yourself. And I've just seen the results, and I've seen so many people transform when they commit to these kind of practices.
They're really powerful. And I mean, that's really metacognition, isn't it? Thinking about the way that you think. And I think that's actually going to be an incredibly important skill set as we move into a future that is full of AI, is people's ability to really think about the way that they think. I love what you said about it could be all of these different things or one of these different things, because every individual's different. For some people, I'm trained in Vedic meditation, but I actually find it really hard to sit still for 20 minutes. And so going for a silent walk in nature, I find much more effective for me and less agitating. And so I think it really is about people being curious and trying a few different things and seeing what actually works for them, rather than thinking that it has to be only one way that works for individuals. And I want to touch on your language around how you said you're conscious of how you frame it, because things like mindfulness have got a bad rap. I ran a workshop for a bunch of partners in a large law firm here a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about the power of breath work, and immediately I could see them all switch off. And I said, okay, I'm sensing I'm sensing that you are a little skeptical about breath work. And they're like, yeah, it's not for us. And I said, well, my husband was in the special forces for 16 years. They use a form of breath work and they call it battle breaths. And I'll teach you what they do before they go into high stakes situations. And I got them all doing it. And then as they left, they're like, we can't wait to do our battle breaths, Ange. We're going to do it before we go into court. And we're going to, and so it really is about tailoring that language in a way that people will relate to rather than just trying to say, hey, this is really good for you.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you frame it that way. I've also brought up how these are practices that in the U.S. Navy SEALs do, right? It's a very common practice that they do, and they're dealing with real pressure. I mean, this is life-threatening situations. And for the folks that we often speak to, Ange, it's not as life-threatening, I'd say, when they're going into these high-pressure situations. And I think that the word curious was one that you said that I want to just double down on, because I do think curiosity is so valuable. It's so valuable. For so many years of my life, before this was over 12 years ago, before I lost my father, I was on that path of autopilot and just kind of going through things. And I thought I got things figured out, I really did. I thought that I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I thought that I had the script laid out. And then I started to struggle. I was getting caught in burnout myself. And I was working for a finance company way before Tesla. And it wasn't until when I experienced the loss of my father that I started to get curious. And curiosity saved me. The curiosity I then got in reading different books and working with different coaches and watching different TED Talks and trying to understand the neuroscience of how our brain works. And that curiosity kept building. And so, it's so important. We said self-awareness is key. I'd say curiosity is next up in regards to what is a foundational skill for anyone, leader, doesn't matter, for anyone to develop.
It's so true. And it's really interesting. I had a wonderful Australian psychologist on the podcast a few weeks ago, and she said the same thing. Self-awareness and curiosity are the two things that are incredibly important leadership skills. And so I love that we're continuing to hear that, because I think curiosity could save a lot of conflict in the workplace as well, because I think often we assume people are doing things for a certain reason, but without the context or the curiosity, we don't really know. And for the most part, people don't come to work to do a bad job, right? Like no one really wants to come to work to do a bad job. There might be that small group of people, but most people want to do a good job. And so I think curiosity can help come at conversations in a different way and garner a much better outcome. I wanted to sort of dive a little bit deeper on that, because from a leadership perspective, I think a lot of leaders, and particularly first-time leaders, really struggle with leading and being liked, and how they sort of separate being a leader versus being liked. And I think being liked can stop a lot of leaders from having really important conversations. It can stop them making certain decisions. What are your thoughts on being liked versus leading, and how do you work with people who have such a strong desire to be liked?
Yeah, well, I was one of them.
We all are, I think, at heart, Jay, aren't we?
I consider myself a recovering people pleaser, and I really do. I feel for those folks who struggle with this. I know what that's like, and it's it's really wired into us. It's another thing related to survival, which is to say that the fear of rejection, the fear that you won't like me, you won't approve of me, the fear that you will speak bad about me, all of that is such a primal fear. And I think that it's really important for a leader who's in this kind of position to understand that. Truly understand that. Really understand where. No, I don't mean you need to go into, childhood traumas and things like that. If you seek counseling or that's fine. I feel like that's not always a necessary step for folks. I think that what I find in working with leaders is just to be able to say, hey, you know what? I know that this comes up in me. I also know it's normal. I know it's human.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to hate myself for it. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm just going to realize that this is a tendency of mine. This is a pattern I often go down. So I'd say that's the first thing, to acknowledge it. Then the second thing I would encourage a leader to do is to say, okay, well, if that's a tendency of yours, how can you take a small step towards seeking out not being liked, but seeking out the best result for others, seeking out the best result for the team. So it could be in one conversation, holding back that apology that you might often say that you don't need to say. Like maybe just start there. Just start noticing, like if you're very, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to have to change your language a little bit and just remove that tendency to apologize. That could be a good start. Small step in the direction, right? And then gradually build this muscle over time. And what you're going to find, and this is the other thing that's helpful, is to kind of look at the light at the end of the tunnel, is that especially folks like me and sounds Ange like you, where, we have this tendency, people really just genuinely like us, and we don't have to worry too much about this.
Yeah.
So even if you do challenge an idea, even if you aren't falling into the people-pleasing tendency, those people will still end up either liking you or at the very least respecting you because you are not falling into that tendency anymore. And it's just your nature to be warm and kind, and people are going to still be attracted to you. So yeah, it really does also come back to that sense of letting go of ego. If you need people to like you, there is something in you that you want to address. You really want to look in that and say, well, how can I shift into building up the confidence within myself where, sure, I prefer people like me, but I don't need them to.
I think it's so important. It comes back to self-awareness and curiosity, doesn't it? Because you're being self-aware of your patterns, then you're curious about maybe why they're occurring and how you can do it differently. And I always say, nice is not kind, clear is kind. And so often by being nice, we're actually protecting ourselves and our own fears rather than trying to help drive our teams forward. And sometimes we can avoid those really important, clear conversations in favor of being nice.
Yeah. And, one shift that I share with people all the time, Ange, is, we think, well, I want to appease other people and I want to please them because I'm selfless. It's a selfless act, and I think it's complete opposite.
I agree.
It's actually quite selfish. It's selfish because it's self-serving, right? You're doing it for a reason. And look, I've done it for a reason too. I get it. Let's just call it for what it is. That's what I mean. It's like, call it for what it is, which is you are seeking out a feeling or you're avoiding an uncomfortable feeling, right? Either I want the feeling of acceptance or I want to avoid the feeling of rejection or discomfort or conflict. And it really is about you. And if you're in a position of leadership, the direction that you're pointing to needs to be out to the people of whom you're serving. So you need to shift that around, and that's going to be uncomfortable, and you need to have the courage to step into that discomfort.
Yeah, it's so true. And it is such a mindset shift, isn't it? Because, in doing that, you can think you're being selfless, but it is self-serving because it's how we want to make sure we're not feeling discomfort or disliked or, whatever that feeling brings up. So I think it's such an important reframe. I think, a lot of leaders I speak to today feel like they're carrying everyone else's stress around them. They're carrying their leaders' stress for results. They're carrying their team's stress in terms of maybe personal stressors or, challenges. What's your advice for people to lead through uncertainty and all of the pressures up and down without becoming emotionally exhausted themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think there's the difference a leader needs to discern between being the superhero and being the captain of the ship. Here's what I mean. The superhero is I come in and I save the day and I swoop down and I grab folks from the fire and I pull them out and I'm stopping the tree from falling on the cat and the person. You know what I mean? Like I'm going through all of this and it's exhausting to do. It sounds cool theoretically to be a superhero, but that superhero is exhausted.
Yeah.
That is not a fun position to be in. Instead, think about the captain of a ship. The captain of a ship walks out to the dock, and the captain will see the crew doing their job. They'll be on one side of the ship, and everything's being taken care of. They go into the kitchen, and the meals are being prepped, and everything is under control. And the captain is there with their coffee or tea, just enjoying, while ensuring that everything is going according to plan. That captain can't be doing all the work of everybody on the ship. The captain cannot be putting out all the fires. Now, if the captain is needed, the captain will do their job and ensure that they're taking care of their team. But it's a huge shift for a lot of leaders because they think, oh, if I'm a leader, then I'm supposed to be the one that fixes everything. No, you're not. So I'll tell you a quick story. I remember one of my top performers, his name was Bobby. So Bobby, he was the kind of person, he'd call me for everything. And it would be kind of frustrating, right? Because I'm getting a lot of calls. He keep asking me, put more on my plate, right? For me to do. And at first I was doing it because I was like, well, I'm supposed to. And then I started to realize that I'm starting to feel a lot of pressure because a lot of my team keeps calling me to put out every fire, Ange. So as I'm working on myself and developing as leader, one day Bobby calls me and he says, so Jay, I have this problem with the roof of this, because it was solar related, this roof at this house. And I want to know, how do I find out what the right angle is before it gets disqualified? Something along those lines. And I thought to myself for a moment, I paused and I said, so Bobby, what have you done so far to figure this out? And he goes, well, I just called you. I said, okay, we have the resource online. It's called The Grid. This was like an online database that he could check. I said, have you checked there yet? And Bobby goes, no, I haven't checked. I said, all right, Bobby, why don't you check there? And if you still can't figure it out, I'm here for you. Call me back. 20 minutes later, Bobby texts me. He said, I found it. Don't worry about it. A week later, Bobby calls me again. And he's like, Jay, a customer just called me. They have a problem. Oh, wait, you're going to just tell me to look at The Grid and check the database online. You know what? Let me do that and I'll call you if I need you. Goodbye. And he hangs up.
I love
and the
that.
point was, like, I realized I needed to go back to my team with questions. I needed to not just take it on myself. That inclination to want to be the savior, sure, it came up, but I noticed it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to turn it back to my team and empower them to solve it. And in doing so, I moved from being the superhero to being the captain of the ship.
I'm sure you'd be familiar with the framework above and below the line. I know Brene Brown has put it in her recent books, but it's years and years old. And I think that's the thing, the hero mode can be very easily misconstrued as an above the line behavior because it looks like you're doing all of the right things and you're stepping in, but it's really a below the line behavior because not only is it burning a leader out, it's also stopping the team from being able to develop and grow and understand how to be self-reliant and find things for themselves. If someone, I don't have kids, but I'd liken it to solving problems for all your kids' problems, right? They'll never learn how to do it themselves and it prevents their growth. And so I love that analogy between the superhero and the captain of the ship. And I think, it's very visual because it takes you back to when you're a child and you think of all the movies with superheroes and captains and things like that. So I think that's a wonderful analogy. I want to talk a little bit.
And it looks appealing, Angie, right?
Yeah.
Angie, it looks appealing. It sounds like it's the right thing to do, but experientially, that hero, that's not a fun job. I don't want that job.
No. And I do think too, it disheartens your team too, because they're like, oh, well, if my leader's swooping in and fixing it, they don't think I'm capable or competent to do it myself. So I think it actually has a lot of unintended consequences.
Agreed. Absolutely. And you were saying it a moment ago, which is like, when I feel empowered, I'm more motivated. I'm feeling more like my work is contributing. It's more meaningful. And if you are a leader who is looking to gain followship, you want people to follow. Well, those people need to know that you believe in them. There is nothing more powerful to motivate an employee than a leader who truly believes in them. And if you're solving all of that person's problems, you're saying, I don't really believe that you can figure this out on your own. And that's disempowering.
Yeah. And it serves the ego too, because you're like, okay, well, I solved that problem for that person, So
yeah, it's something to share at the dinner table with a partner, right? After a long day of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so true. I want to talk a bit about resilience because you've developed a framework for resilience. And I feel like sometimes the word's a little overused in different scenarios. So I want to know, first of all, what's your take on resilience? And second of all, where in your life have you found it hard to implement sort of what you teach in this space? Because I think, there are always times when we test it. And I think, authenticity is being able to, walk the talk, but there are always times when we test it. So I'd love to know your take on resilience and then where maybe you found it hard to sort of practice what you teach here.
Sure. So I think the myth around resilience is that it means that you keep going even when it's hard. That's the simple, basic definition, and it's nonsense. It's nonsense because that's not truly resilience, and it doesn't align with the human experience. So I do my best to debunk that definition and suggest that people who are truly resilient are approaching it in a completely different way. And so actually I was just putting together this new formula of what I believe really is required to be resilient. And it's a combination of, I guess the formula is energy plus space plus choice equals resilience. And so energy is, you do need energy. You otherwise you're going to default into the victim mindset, which is very natural for humans to do, and you fall into resentment and you don't have any ability to respond because you're just so drained, right? So energy is an important part of the equation. And then the second part of that is space. And we talked a lot about that already, which is to be able to observe what's happening with detachment and without judgment. And that requires some mental stillness and the ability to have some space. Also, when I think about space, a professional athlete's a really good analogy. Because if you think about someone who is performing at the highest level in professional sports, physically they could be moving quite a bit, but mentally they're quite still.
Yeah.
They're mentally, they're focused. They're not caught in their stories. They're not worrying. They're not anxious. They're just in that flow state and they're just responding. You want to be in that kind of state to be resilient. And then the third I said is choice. And I'm careful with that word because I don't mean control. Because control is an illusion. We can't control our environment. We can't control even our thoughts. Like I get annoyed, Ange, when I hear people say like, well, control your thoughts and control your feelings. That's like saying control the weather. I can't control. I don't know what thought I'm going to think 5 minutes from now. How am I going to control it, right? The one thing I do have though is choice. I can choose my response. And then if I have those three things, I have energy, I have space, and I have choice, then I am resilient. I am a resilient person. You asked me, when has that been put to the test? Plenty of times. The one that comes to mind, and you mentioned in the intro, I am a TEDx speaker. So I always had a dream of being a TEDx speaker, something I always wanted to do for years, Ange. And it was a little over a year and a half now of me deciding to pursue it head on. And I was invited to speak at a TEDx event. I did the talk in September of 2025, and it was amazing. It was everything I ever dreamed of. I was on that red dot, and the audience loved what I shared, and it was an incredible experience. And then, Ange, at the beginning of 2026, my talk had not been published yet, and I was wondering what was going on. And what happened was the venue had a issue with the audio recording, and it was not captured. At least it wasn't captured well. And they attempted to fix it, and it just was not fixable. It was one of those situations where they would have had to use some AI to try to, and it sounded awful, and there was really nothing they could do at that point. So imagine, after years of wanting to do something like this, it was a dream of mine, having to be met with that kind of adversity. And I shared it with my tens of thousands of followers. I told people it's coming out. And Ange, I remember I had to sit here in my cushion on the ground and just work through the space, creating that space for whatever came up. I had to make choices of how I'm going to respond to all this. And it was tough. It was gripping. It was emotionally disruptive. And I will say that what I could honestly say is that while of course it had a disruptive effect, it didn't last as nearly as long as it would have
Yeah.
15 years ago. 15
Yeah.
years ago, that would have devastated me for weeks on end. Here, it was maybe a couple hours to a day where I was really struggling. And then I was able to bounce back and be resilient and come up with another plan of how I was going to approach my whole business and everything. And so yeah, that's a recent event where I had to respond to adversity.
That's so hard, isn't it? Because I think, as a fellow speaker, I guess for people who don't speak and understand the power of doing something like TEDx and TEDx is ultimately how Brene Brown got really catapulted, right? And so, it's such an opportunity for a speaker, and then to not have that be able to be published, I think is, so tough. Did you ever get any footage of it in the end, or it's gone? You've just had to accept.
I have the video of it, which I was able to get, but the audio quality was so poor that, people were like, "Are you going to try to dub over it?" And I was like, that sounds awful. I have to try to dub my voice exactly. And I just said, you know what, Ange, this is how the choices we make based off of the questions we ask, right? And so the questions I asked led me to look at it from a different perspective, which is it wasn't meant to be, and that's okay. And it's offering me an opportunity to be able to improve it for the next time I have that opportunity, which I intend to still pursue another opportunity to speak on a TEDx stage. And it could pair really well with the book that I'm going to be putting out at the beginning of 2027. So I feel like it's going to lead to something better. And I've learned to just let go, right? Because if I hold on to the resentment of the people who made the mistakes in the back or whatever, how is that serving me? It doesn't get me anywhere. So I just learned to let that go and just keep moving forward. And I'd say for all your listeners, like you go through things, I know you do, where there is unexpected disruption. You mentioned the word uncertainty before, and something comes at you, you could have never seen it coming. That's what happened to me. I could have never saw that coming, right? It's okay for it to be hard when it happens.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be always pleasant and sunshine and rainbows. That's not life. What you have, though, is that power of choice. And if you can step into that power, you can bounce back and be resilient versus it being something that completely derails you.
I think you really nailed it there, Jay, in that the resilience is the speed with which you can bounce back and come to an acceptance of a situation, and it's not necessarily that the situation was good or you're okay with it, but coming to that acceptance and then being able to bounce back quicker is ultimately, I think, that resilience. You sort of mentioned uncertainty, and I think we're in quite an uncertain world at the moment. I mean, the only constant in the world is change, and there's a lot of AI sort of launching. We really don't even know the extent to which it's going to impact our lives and our work. What do you foresee is going to be the most important leadership skill as we move forward into this sort of unknown AI era?
Yeah, two things come to mind immediately. One would just be to double down on curiosity. Always be curious. Don't assume anything around AI, that it's this terrible thing, that it's this great thing. Don't assume anything that's taking people's jobs, that it's going to completely alter everything. Just take it one step at a time. Be curious. And I think that's something that is hard for people to do because there's so much fear around it, or there's so much worry around it. There's so much overthinking and analysis about this, and just stay curious. That's the first thing. And then the second thing that's going to be important, I think, for every leader is to double down on effective communication. What I mean by that is the leaders who are going, I think, to struggle are going to be leaders that are saying, well, if AI is here, it's making everything move faster. I don't need to communicate as much or as effectively. I can let AI communicate for me. And here's the thing, Ange,
please don't is my message.
Yeah, Ange, what's fascinating, and this is coming up more and more, and I've spoken to a few experts on my podcast about this too. People can pick up on AI communication pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So any leader is like, well, I can get around it. Well, they're not going to notice it when I do it. You're wrong. You're totally wrong. And the other thing that we have to be careful not to assume is that because we have, let's say, this younger generation that is coming up through the AI revolution and with emerging technologies and more usage of the phone, that it means that they don't require as much of that effective communication and coaching, and it's just not true. They need it just as much as anyone. The approach is different, I would say. You want to consider, right? Every person is different. Every generation is going to be different.
Yeah.
One thing that stays true, though, is that leaders that will thrive are the ones that are really effective at asking great questions, are prioritizing being interested rather than interesting. And I think that's going to matter so much more as AI becomes more prominent in our work.
I think you've nailed it there. I think in society in general, we need to care more about being interested than interesting. I think you just see it, even when you're talking to people in general, there's so much opportunity just for better communication everywhere. I heard a story the other day where a leader was in a meeting with an employee. They had to deliver some tough feedback and they had AI, I think it might have been ChatGPT, and they were typing in the employees' responses, like talking face to face, typing in the responses and saying, how should I respond to this? And I just thought, oh no, we can't have come to this place. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to have good intent. It's okay if you're not perfect. But that, to me, I was just flabbergasted that that's where we've gotten to in some places.
Absolutely. And Ange, like the mistake, if you do make one, could be what creates the best bond between you and your employee. Like I have to tell you, like I've made some terrible mistakes. I remember once I was working with I had one of my team members and he wasn't doing his work on updating his pipeline. And this was a sales role. And I kept emailing him about it. And then one time I got so frustrated, I emailed him and I CC'd the director, which was a terrible idea. I learned, like, I felt like in the moment that was the right thing to do, right? But I had the team meeting the next morning and he was there and he was so upset. I could see it in his face. And I realized I made a mistake. So I asked him to come meet me in the office the next morning. He came in and I remember he came in guns a-blazing. He was ready to give it to me, Ange. And the first thing I did was I looked him in the eye and I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I should not have done that. And he appreciated my apology so much and our relationship changed. Everything improved after that. Had I not made that mistake, like I'm not saying that was a good mistake, but the mistake led to the better relationship. So you're right. Like being an authentic human is not something to push to the side because AI is going to make either the job easier or make you think that you're communicating perfectly. No, what people want is authentic human connection.
Absolutely. And I think what you've touched on there, which I think is such an important leadership skill, is repair. Because as leaders, we're never going to be perfect, but the ability to self-reflect and go and say to that person, hey, I did not handle that the way I would have liked to. I'm really sorry. And on to the next. And I think that means more to people, like you said, than having gotten it perfect in the first place, So I think that skill of repair is really important as a leader as well. And it requires you to put the ego aside too, right?
Yes. And, I think it's, it takes courage, it takes courage to own your mistakes. It takes courage. And every time it happens, I would encourage every listener to think of it like this. Every time it happens, don't be so hard on yourself to where you said, I did this wrong. I made this mistake. I'm awful. Instead, I'm grateful I'm learning from this. And this is helping me to grow. This is helping me to become a better leader.
Absolutely. It's really that mindset shift. I want to finish on just one last question and perspective. You shared, and thank you, and I'm sorry that you lost your dad as well. You shared earlier that you lost your father unexpectedly and you left a career that wasn't fulfilling and you've sort of rebuilt your life into, this work that you're doing now. When you look back, what did all of those experiences teach you about purpose that continuing on that on-paper successful career couldn't have taught you?
It taught me to really tune in to intuition. I think so I left Tesla years ago. It's about 7.5 years ago now. I think it's the best example of this. And I was going on interviews because I thought, the next corporate role, that's gonna be the right thing for me. And I've done a lot of work at this point on myself, Ange. And I met with the CEO of one company, took me out to lunch in New York City, wants me to be the head of sales and run up the leadership development program there. But I left that lunch and I felt this in my gut. I can't even describe it. It was like an ick, like a no, not this. I met with another VP, same thing. I left there feeling like, no, not this. And I just couldn't shake that feeling. And I also didn't fight it. Had I looked at what was logical, what my mother would have wanted me to do, that would have been take this next salary and jump to the next role. I wouldn't be here with you right now. I would be doing something else and most likely unfulfilled. It was because I listened to that intuition. I remember one day I was sitting in a Barnes & Noble after all these interviews and nothing feeling right. And I said to myself, I'm done trying to figure this out. I'm letting it all go. Universe, whatever you got for me, bring it on. I will take it. And it was like a day later, I received a phone call from somebody who said, Jay, I'm starting a business and I could use some help with a consultant. Do you think you could help me with this? And I said, sure. I had no idea what this was. I said, sure. And that led to another thing, which led to another thing, which led to me starting a coaching practice, which then led to me keynote speaking. And now 7 years later, I love what I do. But had I not listened to my intuition, my whole life would have been different. So I would say the lesson I learned and the lesson I hope everybody could take from that is trust your intuition. There is something in you, a deeper wisdom that you can't really even put in words, that your thoughts won't be able to put together, but you feel it. And when you feel it, trust it and listen to it.
It's such a great way to leave this episode on, Jay, because I think it circles right back to the beginning on that self-awareness and the stillness. Because the only way you can listen to your intuition, I think, is by allowing enough space and stillness and having enough self-awareness to do that. And so what a great full circle way to end the podcast today. Where can everyone find you? Because you have offered so much wisdom today. And I think, people would love to follow you along for your journey. So where can everyone find you?
Yeah, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So anyone searching Jay Abbasi on LinkedIn, they find me there. My website is jayabbasi.me. That's the home of everything, as well as on YouTube, Jay Abbasi Podcast, as well as Unstuck with Jay Abbasi, where we have weekly episodes there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and joining me all the way from New Jersey today. I appreciate it.
It was fantastic, and you are excellent at what you do. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Ange Davis. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.